Hello and welcome to Module 5 of the Perl workshop. In this workshop, in this module rather, we're going to be learning how to deal with files, reading in files and writing out to files. So the first thing that we need to talk about are command line arguments. And these are really important for when you're going to start to read in files and write files out. So what I mean by command line arguments is here. So if you look at this command, I'm saying Perl, and then I'm giving it my script, and that's what we're used to doing. Now after my script, I can put any number of what are called command line arguments. So here I have 3, and I have test.txt, and maybe I want to say out.txt as my text file, and I can put a few others. It doesn't matter. Notice that they can be numeric, and they can be strings. It doesn't matter. They can also have decimals if they want. So to illustrate what happens, what I've done is I'm going to print out each argument that I've sent it. And so let me run this. Okay, so it's just now iterating through those arguments. Now how I did that was through this built-in array called argv. So this Perl maintains this. You don't have to declare it or populate it. Perl does that for you. So first, very first thing that I print out is the number of arguments. So I want to capture the length of this array. Notice that it is an array. By setting the array equal to a scalar, just this regular variable. And by doing this, I effectively get the length of the array. And now I can print it, and the number of arguments is 8. And we do see that I did have 8 arguments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now I run a for loop. If you remember from the last module, we talked about for loops. So I can run a for loop through that those number of arguments, and I can print each one, which is what I did. Okay, so that's just a basic of command line arguments. We're going to be using those to send in a file name that our program can then open and read. So we won't comment this out. We'll keep that in there for the whole duration of the module, and so we can see what we've printed or what we've passed to our program. Let me uncomment these. Oops. There we go. Okay, so part 2, we're going to talk about reading from a file. Reading from a file is pretty straightforward. So the first thing, so if we're going to, let's say, so I don't have any files in here, but I'm going to create a file by using VI. And if you're not familiar with VI, it's a text editor that allows you to create files completely remotely just from your terminal. There is a workshop in Linux that we've done, and Module 4 talks about VI. So give that a look if you want more information about VI. So VI, and I can give it, I'm going to just call it test.txt, and it opens a blank file. So I am going to put some, I'm going to make it like a CSV file. So now I'm going to save it. So if I do a head on my test.txt, I'll see that now I have this data inside of test.txt. And this is the data that I'm going to try to read in. So first thing, my command, I want my command to look like this. So Perl lesson5.perl and then test.txt. So I'm sending the name of the file, test.txt, in as a command line argument. And it's going to be that very first element. So if we look above at the previous output, the first element that I sent in, a 3, here, was the 0th element. So it's the very first element in that argv matrix, or array rather. So here's the matrix, or the array, and we are grabbing the 0th element, and we're going to save that into just a variable called inFile, and that's going to hold this string. It's going to hold test.txt. Now I can do an open command. So I want to open, and this is going to be the name that I'm going to use for the rest of the program to denote that I'm reading in that file. You can name it whatever you want. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be capitalized either. I just like that preferentially, so I can see which one of my variables are files, and which one are just variables. Notice that it doesn't have a $sign or an array at the beginning of it. It's just plain text. So this is the name. So maybe I should write this in a comment. So open name. And then the second part here, you're telling it to read in from that inFile. And this caret's important. It's going to push this data into this variable. So, let's see. And then, well, file name. So that's the basic syntax there. And then I have this or die, which is really error throwing. So for instance, if there is no test.txt, or for some reason it can't open it due to permissions or something like that, it'll throw an error and say that I can't open inFile. And I'll demo that in a second. So this is the basic format. Okay, and I will add the or die, and then this is just error message. Okay, so at this point we've successfully hopefully opened our file, or we've thrown an error saying that we don't have that file. So let me demo that. So I have test.txt, but I don't have something called dummy.txt. Oh, I need to save this. Okay. Alright, so you see that the error, in this case, since I don't have that file, it can't find that file, so it can't open it. And so it will print out that error message. Okay. So I want to do test.txt. And so let me walk you through what the rest of this program is doing before you see it. So we have our while loop, if you remember from the last module. So while this is this directive, this diamond directive here is what they call it, will just read in sequential lines. And so when I put input in between them, it's going to, so basically how you would say it is while there is still text inside of input, so we're walking down through the lines of your input file, and while we're not at the end of that file, the loop will execute. So here my variable line is going to grab each line, and that's what this denotes. So this will grab each line of the file one at a time. So when we go into the loop the first time, we'll grab the first line. We go into the loop the second time, we'll grab the second line, so on and so forth. So chomp, I always like to do this. Sometimes you may not have to. It removes the invisible character at the end of a line, and what I mean by that is, so these //ns, these new lines, some of your data may have those in them, just embedded in them, and you won't be able to see them in a text editor. And it may throw off your processing of the file. So I always chomp. You can also do something called a chop. And the chop line will just, instead of just getting rid of invisible characters and on either side, it'll just chop the last character off of the line. So it will remove the last character. So for some reason, if that's what you want to do, Perl's got you covered. I'm going to comment it out for now, and then I'm just going to print this line. So all I'm doing is I'm reading in the line, chomping it, and then printing it. And then I want to close my input. So every time I open something, I want to close it after I'm done with it. So let's see what this does. Okay, so it did exactly what we wanted it to do. So it has essentially just printed out the data that was in test.txt. So that's reading from a file. That's pretty straightforward. Now we're going to go on to writing to a file. Well, first, what I should mention is that you don't have to do formal opening and closing of files, especially when you're writing to a file. So this is formal opening and closing inside of here. What you can do instead is you can say Perl lesson 5. So this the same command. And now if I want to save this output, this is the output, to a file, what I can do is I can use file redirection, which is this caret here, that pushes this into a file called out.txt. And now you'll see that I don't get anything printed to the screen anymore. But if I do a head on out.txt, there's my output. So you can do it as simple as that. But I'm going to show you the formal way, just in case you want to do something a little bit more complicated, or you want to have multiple out files where you have part of your output printing to one file, part of it printing to the other file, or so on and so forth. So I will show you the formal way of doing it. Oh, not uncomment. Sorry. Okay. So in part 3, we're going to be looking at how to formally open a file. And if you forget about that, uncomment. If you forget about what I just told you about file redirection, I have it here in the comments, just so you remember. Okay, so in this one, how I've set it up is that I want to have an input file, or an input file and an output file. See, so I've grabbed argv at 1. And so basically I'm denoting that I have, let me just go back to without this. I already have something filling up that 0th spot, and let's just keep test.txt, even though in this part we won't deal with it. In the next part we'll combine both of these together, opening, closing, or opening to read and writing and closing. So anyway, we already have this 0th spot filled, so we want to fill this first spot with our out file. So let's just call it out.txt. And it doesn't matter if you already have an out.txt in this directory that you're working in. It will rewrite over it. So that's something you should take into consideration. If you don't want your data written over, then you may want to give it a different name each time. But I don't particularly care. So I'm just going to write over out.txt. And as you can see, it's kind of the same style as opening, but with a little bit of difference. So we open, we name it, and now we have this caret going the other direction, denoting that we're going to put things into this file that we've sent in here, the name of it here. Or die, can't open it. This is pretty standard. You will kind of want to throw an error message, or you won't know what's going on. If your program is not running, error messages are a good way of figuring out why they're not running. So the way you actually print to a file is really straightforward in Perl. So before we had print statements that look like this, that we just printed and then we print, and that printed straight to the terminal. Now you just want to put print and then that name that you gave your output file, and then just the string that you were going to already print. So really the only thing that you add in here is the name of the file, and you're done. So here I'm printing to the output the number of arguments, and then I'm just looping through the number of arguments and printing each of those to the output. Okay, so let's do this. So it's a little deceiving. Looks like it didn't work, but this is printing here because we still have it up here uncommented. But if we look into out.txt, so if we do a head on out.txt, we see that the same things are in there, so it did work. Okay, so then we close out the output, and then we're done. So let's go on to a little bit more encompassing. We want to, every time. Okay, let me add an extra comment there since it's a comment. Okay, that should be good. Okay, so this is our final example. For those of you who are working with CSV files, this should be pretty informative for you on how to parse them. So we can comment. So our test.txt, if you recall, is a CSV file. So what we're going to do in this exercise is we're going to read it in, and then we're going to parse it, we're going to modify it, and then we're going to write it to a file. Okay, so these two are straight, all four of these are actually straight from above. So we grab the name of our in file from the command line arguments at element 0. So again, our our command is going to look like this. It's going to say Perl, the script, and then these two command line arguments. So the 0th element will be test.txt, and the first element will be out.txt. And then we open them and we give them a name, or we throw an error if we can't open them. And now we go into our while loop. So we want to loop through our input, grab each line, clean it up, get rid of any space at the end. And now this is where we can start looking at the individual elements of our line. So at this point, before this, it's just a string. It's just a long string. We don't know about each individual element. But what we can do is we can split each individual element that are comma separated by using the split command. So the split command, let me write this in there for you guys. The basic syntax for split is this. So you split based on some regular expression that is encapsulated by these slashes, and then you give it the string to split. So this regular expression can be anything that you want to match to. In my case, I want to do a comma. You can also put a tab by, so let me write some of the basic ones. So some basic regexes. Will be, let's see, so comma. So this right here, this \t denotes a tab. You can also split on a new line, so every line. Let's see, what else would be helpful? I guess some people may have semicolon delimited, and so on and so forth. So the thing that goes in between here is just what you want to split on. You can also split on white space, so on and so forth. So here we're splitting on comma, and we're saving it into an array. So now what that does is each element of that array will hold one element of my data. So let's remind us of what our data looks like. So this first time it goes through the while loop, it'll have this line. And when it hits the split statement, array element 0 will now equal 1, array element 2, or 1 will now equal 3, and array element 2 will now equal 5. So now you can see how you could iterate through and change something and just change one element. Okay, so we get the length of the array because we want to loop through it. Say we want to look for a certain number, certain condition, and change the data if that condition is met. So we're looping through each line, so each array at this point. So we go through and we're going to say if any element of that array is greater than 5, we want to replace it with an n. And now we want to write this to our output. And so notice I'm printing the output and I'm putting a comma after each one. So this will convert it back to comma delimited. And then after the for loop, I want to print a new line character to output so that our data will be on separate lines as it is in the input file. So let's run this and see what we get. Okay, so head text. Oh, I didn't save it. That'll do it. There we go. So you see that, so this is our original test.txt. So now we looked and we found anything that was greater than 5, we replaced it with an n. So these two last lines get n's. Now if you notice, there are some trailing commas. And that's because what we did here. So every time we went through that for loop and we looked at an element, we printed a comma after. So that's just something to be aware of. There are ways to get around that. You can essentially just modify your array. So just modify your array. Don't worry about printing things. And then after you're done printing or modifying things, then you can loop through your array and print things out. I'm not going to go over that now because I don't think I have too much time. But if you have questions about that, you can maybe put it in the comments and I can talk with you offline, or I can make another video to elaborate on that. So again, please comment down below on anything else you want to see in the workshops. From here, I'll be putting more advanced topics of Perl and Linux online. And next, in the next few days, we'll also be talking about R and putting a workshop together for R, processing of data in R. Okay, so thank you for listening, and hope to see you next time.